and welcome to the first ever edition of Nice Skates Wanna Puck podcast. My name is Matt Lauren.
And my name is Ian Esplin.
Thanks for joining us. We are recording live from, well, not live by the time you hear this, but we are currently live from Mount Royal's journalism recording suite. We're recording out of a single microphone, so this is a work in progress, and we're learning along the way. So, Mom, Dad, thanks for tuning in.
It will get better.
So, Ian, Happy New Year. Hope you got a chance to take in a bit of the hockey yesterday. Another fantastic edition of the Winter Classic.
Yeah, I only caught the first period of it, but, just that atmosphere of seeing the snowfall and the players, the goalies with the toques, you just can't beat that.
Yeah, from an NHL perspective, it couldn't have been more aesthetically pleasing. Just like you said, the toques on the helmets and, just the shots, from of 110,000 people packed into the stadium. Obviously, we weren't there. We discussed this earlier. Maybe not the most enjoyable experience if you're sitting, 60, 70 rows up and can't see the puck, but that's what the beer's for.
Yeah.
Heading into the Stadium Series coming up here.
You think they had some scotch to keep them warm, perhaps, up in that level?
I'm not sure what they drink in Michigan these days.
Yeah?
Maybe
A
some
little bit of
cheap,
that hooch.
little cheap hooch. Moving on. They got the Stadium Edition coming up. The first game will be played January 25th at Dodger Stadium in Los Angeles, featuring the Kings and the Anaheim Ducks. That will be followed up with two games at Yankee Stadium on the 26th and the 29th. You have the Devils and the Rangers, and then, of course, the Islanders playing the Rangers. And then the last version of the Stadium Series will be played March 1st at Soldier Field. The Pittsburgh Penguins will be playing the Chicago Blackhawks. And finally, the Heritage Classic the following day, March the 2nd at BC Place, featuring the Senators versus the Vancouver Canucks. As we discussed earlier, yesterday was a pretty perfect situation for the NHL. Going to be tough to top that, I believe.
Yeah, I can't see the next one being any good. I mean, palm trees in hockey, there's just something that just doesn't work there.
And I think there's something to be said about these baseball stadiums. I understand that they're vacant in the wintertime, so it's much easier to host these games with football season wrapping up. I don't see why they couldn't have found maybe a couple other college stadiums. USC.
The Rose Bowl, if they want to play in L.A.
Not
that
sure how
might
they're
have
going to have ice there, but
maybe they chose Dodger Stadium because they figured they can only sell 40,000 tickets to a Kings game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so I'm excited to see what a hockey rink looks like parked in the middle of Yankee Stadium. But of all of these, the only one I really have circled on my calendar is the March 1st game at Soldier Field.
It's almost a shame they never got to do it at the old Yankee Stadium, because I know you've been there, I've been there. That's a building.
The character, the history, the personality. I mean, the Yankee Stadium these days, it's it encompasses a sports franchise that really hasn't achieved a whole lot since moving into that stadium.
No.
Okay, moving on from that, one of the players in yesterday's game recently signed a large contract, very controversial in the eyes of some. We're talking about former Flame Dion Phaneuf. He recently signed, as of yesterday actually it was announced, 7 years, $7 million cap hit per season. Dion Phaneuf is rich.
Yeah. What more can you say? That goes with the $39 million deal the Flames gave him. He's probably doing okay.
I think Dion's done pretty well for himself. A lot of people have issue with this contract, whether or not it's the term or the actual dollar amount. But the Leafs were in a pretty tough situation here. They don't have a whole lot, on that back end.
No.
And with the salary cap going up, I personally don't have a huge issue with the number.
But on the other hand, he's the fifth highest paid defenseman now in the league. Is Dion Phaneuf the fifth best defenseman in hockey?
Probably not, but I think that will change as other defensemen come up for contract renewal. Or it may not, as they keep signing these 14-year contracts that takes them into their late 50s. But Dion Phaneuf, he's 28 years old. He's playing over 24 minutes a night. He's a plus 13 this year. Just some comparables, as far as that goes. Drew Doughty is a plus 13. Petrangelo plus 12, Mark-Edward Vlasic plus 13. So he is in some good company. And maybe not top 5 defenseman in the world, but
yeah, there's no doubt he's a good defenseman. I'm just not sure he's an elite guy. I think he's a 2-3 on a Stanley Cup winner type of player.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
And to me, a 2-3 guy is right now it's around $5.5 million market value. Makes you wonder how they're gonna in the future they're gonna sign a guy like a Cody Franson, who arguably is playing as well as Dion Phaneuf right now, and he's a restricted free agent at the end of the year. And where are you gonna find the money for a guy like that?
I think over in the next 2 years, it's going to look like a bit of an albatross.
Yeah.
3 or 4 years down the road when the cap goes up, I think this contract will be, it will be kind of the standard that you'll set for, as you say, a number 2, number 3 defenseman on a team. The issue I would have, and I think the issue that most Leafs fans have with this, is that you've essentially locked up your not only a defenseman but the captain and face of your franchise, and I think that's where some people take issue.
Yeah.
Dion Phaneuf, I mean, we know the love-hate relationship that the Flames fans had with him, and I'm sorry if I'm building a team tomorrow. Are you slapping a C on Dion Phaneuf?
Probably not.
And last thing to note, he has 50 penalty minutes this year with only 1 fight, so I found that a little bit surprising. I've taken as much Leafs hockey as I can bear, but he's still no stranger to the penalty box.
A lot of that, though, is he's often paired against the other team's best players, so you play against the best players, you're bound to take a few more penalties.
That's true.
So,
in a system that is not exactly defense first.
Yeah.
Where do you want to move next? Let's talk a little bit of Calgary Flames, because that's where we are broadcasting from, and we will primarily talk about Calgary Flames on this podcast, but we're going to talk all things hockey and NHL. Recent trade.
Yeah, the Calgary Flames went out and got a little truck, in Brian Burke's words, truculence.
Truculence.
You got a definition for that, Matt?
I made a point to go online and actually define truculence, because I think for the most part people have an idea of what it means, but it's kind of Berkey's MO. And from dictionary.com, the definition of truculence: fierce, cruel, savagely brutal, brutally harsh, vitriolic, scathing, aggressively hostile, and belligerent. So Flames fans, if you want to know the identity of this hockey team and the direction that it's going in, there's some terms you can now use.
Nothing about goals in there, hey?
Nothing about goals or finesse or speed.
Speed, skill.
Defense first. Truculence.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what this trade is. You're talking about a guy in Greg Nemeth that, this organization had high hopes for. I believe he goes back. He's a Daryl Sutter pick. And it just never panned out. He's played 32 games in Abbotsford this year, only 9 points. He is a +5. Apparently a pretty good dressing room guy, but to me, this is I don't want to sound condescending to either player. I won't say garbage in, garbage out. I think it's a little bit of a meaningless trade in the big picture.
Yeah.
People are that upset that we have another goon on the team. Yeah, that goes back to the way that Brian Burke is going to build this team. He's Westgarth is 6 feet, 235 pounds. He got in 7 fights last year. According to hockeyfights.com, he won the majority of them. So, he's a guy that's going to go out there. And you can't rely on Brian McGrattan to do it every night.
Yeah.
Even though the guy is incredibly intimidating. The look on his face when he drops the mitts, I mean, I would be getting the hell out of there.
Yeah.
But, if he breaks a finger or something, you need some more of these depth guys that can help be out there to protect Sean Monahan and Sven Baertschi and give these little guys some wiggle room.
And at the same time, you look at where the Calgary Flames are in terms of salary cap. They're 27th in the league. I believe they have over $19 million they can spend. So adding $725,000 to that payroll is nice and easy for them. I viewed the trade almost as he's played 12 games in Carolina. He's not playing. He was probably on the waiver wire pretty soon, and they were able to move a guy like Greg Nemeth on to some maybe a better opportunity in Carolina. And
you move out an asset that that basically no longer has any value with this team. It's a couple of expiring contracts, and this won't be a move later down the road that fans are going to look at that really put this team over the top if they remember it at all.
Yeah.
The way I look at it, they get a guy that's actually playing in the NHL right now for someone who is not. So not much more to say about that.
And
we'll
that's
move on from
the
that.
big benefit for a team like Carolina, because Greg Nemeth's cap hit of $85,000, whereas they would have been paying $725K to
have
Westgarth around sitting on the press box, which
don't know a whole lot about Kevin Westgarth, but apparently a really good dressing guy as well.
From Princeton.
Princeton,
psychology degree.
So he's a smart guy. What's with all these tough guys, being incredibly intelligent?
And I believe he helped out a lot with the NHLPA during the lockout.
So I guess what you're saying is that there is a role for goons moving forward in the NHL.
Yes, it's more in the management role, it appears, than the on-ice role. But
a certain irony to that. Hey?
There is, definitely a role for him.
Okay, let's move on and talk a little bit more Flames. Again, we're going to talk mostly Calgary Flames hockey on this podcast. We've got a lot of different topics, and we'll hopefully line up some interviews over the next couple of months. But Ian, just talk about your maybe some surprises, some disappointments at this point, highlights.
The biggest highlight for me has been the play of Chris Russell. I mean, when they picked this guy up, I thought of him no more as a 6th, 7th guy. Thought maybe he might dress for 50, 60 games. Good dressing room guy as well. But then you look at him, he's what, 5'9", 170 pounds, if that. A little hard to play defense in the National Hockey League at that size.
Certainly not a Brian Burke type of player, at least the way that he's built physically.
Yes. But then you look at his numbers, and I mean, we talked about Dion Phaneuf. Chris Russell not very far behind. Dion's got, I believe, 15 points. Chris Russell's got 16 points. They're both playing about 24 minutes a game. He's a +1, whereas Dion's a +13. And you're getting all that for $1.5 million, which is just a steal of a deal. He's a player that I really think should be locked up for the next 3 to 5 years. Kind of the cap hit I see him at is around $3 million. I don't think he's done enough to warrant any more than that. But at the same time, he's been arguably their 3rd best defenseman this season. And how do you just let a guy like that walk at the end of the year?
And I agree. And through 30 games, it's a pretty small sample size. But I'm with you. When the Flames made this acquisition in the summertime, I wasn't jumping out of my seat. He was a guy I wasn't sure if he would even make this roster, if he would be playing in Abbotsford. I mean, I would relate it a little bit to Corbin Knight, except a different position and a little more experience. But a guy I didn't know a whole lot about, and we saw the direction that Corbin Knight's gone. Some people expected that he might make this team. Some did not. It turns out that he did not. Now he's playing down in Abbey. But as you said, playing over 23 minutes a night, 16 points. He's played, well above expectations. And as you say, I think it's worthy that...
Yeah, he's still... Even though he's been injured for the last couple games, he's still tops in the team with 105 block shots.
And if he's not going to fit into Brian Burke's mold, I seriously think they need to consider signing this guy long term. But if not, at least hopefully he's done enough where maybe he can be, worth something as far as
definitely Tortorella type guy with 105 block shots.
Okay, my surprise, I guess what I've been most impressed with this season is Mark Giordano. I don't know how we're pronouncing it. It seemed like it went to Giordano last year, and the media started slipping on that recently. But Mark Giordano's emergence as the captain on this team post Jerome McGinley, huge shoes to fill on a team with not a whole lot going for it, not a whole lot of expectation. And I've been incredibly impressed with the way that he's taken on this role. He's battled through some injury, but when he's out there, he's been the best player on the ice, and he leads by example every night. We'll talk about it a little bit later, but you actually have him on your roster for Team Canada.
I do.
I don't have him very far off, and maybe we're a little bit biased in the sense that we get to watch him on a night-to-night basis, but what he brings to the table, offensively, defensively, and more so as a leader on this team, and I've been incredibly impressed. It's something that, the beloved Jerome McGinley just wasn't doing in the latter stages of his career in Calgary. And, I'm not blaming that on Jerome by any means. There's a lot that can be said about this. But The Flames are playing with an identity this year that they haven't in years past. They're a harder working team, and something has to be said about Mark Giordano's role in that dressing room.
So what was your low light so far this year, though?
Tough to have a low light with a team that doesn't have very high expectations. So, I had to kind of go on a game-to-game basis. I haven't been disappointed. They have their good nights. They have their bad nights. They're going to struggle in goal. They're going to get outplayed and outshot on a lot of nights. But as long as they're, they're hustling and they're working for loose pucks, I'm generally pretty happy. There's one player on this team that has not lived up to the billing, and that's Mike Camilleri.
Mm-hmm.
He's currently a -17, which is the worst on the Flames. He does lead the team in shots with 98, but he only has 2 power play goals. As you said earlier, he's very streaky, and a guy that I thought post Jarome Iginla would emerge as Mark Giordano has, as Curtis Glencross has, as a real leader on this team. He tends to take the odd night off.
Yeah, he was a guy before the season that I would have put the C on. Him, Giordano.
No, he was certainly in that mix, in that conversation.
You see him on the bench. He's definitely one of the more verbal guys on that team. And like you said, he's a streaky guy. I mean, at one point he was leading this team in goals. I think he still is, but he had 8 goals in the first 12 or 15 games, it seemed like. And now he's got 12 goals in 35 games and seems to have tailed off. But at the same time, like, when he's out there and he wants to play, he's as good as a lot of players in the National Hockey League.
Absolutely. He has that ability to take over a game and take over a shift, and we're just not seeing that on a night-to-night basis. And maybe it's time that he gets a change of scenery. It's his second stint in Calgary in a lot different circumstance than his first time here.
Because, I mean, that game against the Kings where he scored the winner with a minute or so left, just went in there, took the puck, took it to the net, scored the goal.
Yeah, it made it look easy.
It's a guy I take on my team any day. It's just too bad he's not around a little more.
How about for yourself, as far as lowlights or disappointments on this season?
For myself, they're really, like you said, the expectations here, I think they're actually overachieving from what a lot of people predicted. They're in pretty much every game. The points haven't gone their way, and sometimes, and maybe a couple more bounces and they're a little closer to the playoff race. But getting shut out the other day by the Edmonton Oilers, I mean, how do you get shut out by Devan Dubnyk?
Yeah, that team is a hot mess. And, if it wasn't for the Oilers being as poor as they are this year, maybe there would be a little more conversation about where the Flames are at. But, what's going on up north in this province, it's a hot mess. And they're making a lot more headlines, obviously, with higher expectations. But, no, you're right. They didn't play a good game. They got away from that identity that they've kind of formed this season as a team that's going to out-compete, out-hustle.
But one thing coming out of that game, every guy in that dressing room that they interviewed after said, we didn't deserve to win this. And, my hat's off for that, is to have that kind of class, to just be able to say, we weren't good enough tonight. Mm-hmm. We have to be better. And that's a good thing to see, because you can only build upon that.
Well, and to go into Vancouver, host Vancouver a few nights later and to get shut out again. But again, I think they played a little bit better. They showed a little bit more heart. This team's going to get shut out at times. They don't have a whole lot of offensive talent. Mm-hmm. So, moving forward into the new year.
U.S. named their Olympic team yesterday.
U.S. did name their Olympic team.
Some notable absences on that team. 2 of the top 5 scorers in the NHL, or 2 of the top 5 American scorers in the NHL, Bobby Ryan, Kyle Okposo, left off the list. Other than that, this team looks like it's got a lot of grit and character. They've got David Backes, Ryan Callahan, Max Pacioretty, Ryan Kessler. A lot of
some serious sandpaper up there.
Yeah, a lot of experience in goal. They decided to go with the guys who've played a little more in the NHL. One surprise for me, the big surprise for me, was Ben Bishop. I mean, the guy's got 21 wins this season, aside from how well he's played save percentage, goals against average wise. But he has 21 wins. Guess how many the rest of the 3 goalies they did take have?
How many is that?
They got 26 wins in net between the 3 guys.
And obviously that has something to do with injury. But, no, you're absolutely right. You're making a great point that Ben Bishop has been the most consistent American goaltender in the NHL through 36 games this season. And I'm surprised he didn't get a look, especially the Jimmy Howard situation. Jonathan Quick, I think his play in his Stanley Cup run a few years ago, he has his reputation to earn him a spot on that team. And Ryan Miller, despite playing on an awful team, we actually went in and looked at some of the stats. His save percentage is actually quite decent in comparison with most of the league. And you also know his history with this team, playing in that gold medal game and playing out of his shoes, almost the reason that the Americans upset us in 2010. Definitely a little bit surprised there. I was surprised with the Bobby Ryan thing. He played on the team in 2010.
Yeah,
he's on pace for his fifth 30-goal season. Like, he has all the offensive skills. He skates pretty well for the most part. But by the sounds of it, it's between his ears.
Yeah, we won't necessarily go there, but Brian Brooks not exactly a fan of this kid, and
he's been described as sleepy.
Do you think they have Dopey or Doc on this team?
So moving
Going
forward.
That was just terrible.
With the U.S. team, another big surprise, defenseman Keith Yandel left off this roster. I thought he was a lock to make this team heading into the year. A few other notable...
Yeah, as you say with Keith Yandel, I mean, to me, he's a top 25 defenseman in the world. It was no question that he was on this team before. And, I've seen lots of tweets saying if this kid played in New York, he's probably one of the front runners on this team. It's just he gets buried down there in Phoenix. All he does is play, 25 minutes a night, produce offensively. Maybe not a guy you want out there, with a minute to go in the game, because he's been a little sketchy in his own end at times, but, still a great skater, decent size, good player, knows how to play the team game with that Phoenix system, which I don't even know who they have down there, but they just keep winning.
I think there's something to be said about that. I think it's kind of like, as we'll talk about with Mark Giordano playing on a Flames team that's flying way under the radar, no one's paying attention to. But it also speaks to the, there's a lot of depth on this American team.
Yeah.
And I don't think you could say that. In 2010, there was, less notables left off the roster. So, and you have, some really strong emerging defensemen in the American system, the Shat and Kirks. And biggest surprise as far as who made the roster?
Brooks Orpik's a guy that I don't see him on the international ice. He's not a great skater. He's
got the Paul Martin connection.
Yeah, but at the same time, I mean, his head coach is coaching this team with Dan Belsma, plays a lot with Paul Martin, so there's a lot of chemistry there. But at the same, I don't see him as a guy I would say is a top 8 defenseman in the United States system. What about yourself?
Yeah, I agree there. Couple surprises. Not a whole lot up front, I guess, besides Bobby Ryan. The Johnson brothers being left off, or Johnson brothers, the two Johnsons, I should say, Eric and Jack being left off the team. Not a complete surprise, but two guys that were on the team in 2010. Jack Johnson's having a tough season playing for a pretty lousy team. Eric Johnson's numbers are actually fairly consistent. I thought he would have a shot to make this roster, but not blown away that he's not there. I think the big one, as we touched on, was Keith Yandel.
Yeah, and one of the snubs too that I also had. This kid's playing amazing in New York, and Chris Kreider. I mean, he's probably the best skater of all the Americans in the NHL right now. He gets in on the forecheck, finishes checks. His teammate Derek Stepan made the team. Terrible on faceoffs. Only scored a couple more points in more games.
Yeah, I will say I'm a little bit surprised that Derek Stepan will be making this team. But, again, he's going to be playing probably fourth-line minutes.
If he gets a sniff. I mean,
he's
the 25th guy, in my opinion, when you look at that roster.
Looking at that roster, what do you project this American team finishing? Obviously, we need the rest of these rosters to come out.
But, I don't want to say that they're not going to medal, because anytime you got a team with Jonathan Quick or potentially Ryan Miller backstopping, one of those guys can get hot, and they can beat anyone in the world. And they have some guys who can definitely get the job done, but I do think that looking at this roster, it's not as good as it could be.
Not as much depth down the middle. Certainly not compared to the Canadians. They do have some very good centermen there, but after 3 or 4, it gets a little bit more shallow. Their strength is up the wing. I think they have what it takes to compete. I think this team will probably ride a David Backes into probably a medal game. A little too early to make bold predictions, but I think this American team is in the top 4.
Mm-hmm. And moving on from that, what do you think of our own team, Canada? Who do you got?
Well, we're going to find out very soon, and we've gone over our list this morning before recording, and we agree on a lot of things, and we also disagree on some things. Let's start with the goaltending situation. I have Roberto Luongo, Carey Price, and as far as the third guy goes, I can flip-flop all you want, but I'm currently going to go with Mike Smith.
See, I've got Luongo. I've got Price. I think that's a no-brainer for everyone who's putting teams together. I don't think haven't seen those two guys on the team. My third guy is Josh Harding. I just think he's been far too good this year. I know some people are concerned with the whole MS thing and everything, but he's been good so far. And, to me, you build you take the guy who's playing the best right now, and you put him in, and if he fails, then you got Luongo or Price behind him.
And I'm not going to disagree with anything you said. This is the list I would have had going into this morning, and then we had a conversation about this. And just as with Ben Bishop, he's the hot hand. The MS thing, to me, it just doesn't matter.
Yeah.
As you said, it hasn't acted up for a while. It would be an incredible story for Josh Harding to go and represent Team Canada after all that he's been through. What he's done already is very remarkable. And his stats,
1.65 goals against average, 9.33 save percentage.
Yeah, and you put him up against the Mike Smith, and you put him up against a Corey Crawford, and his numbers are better. And it could be argued that he's certainly playing for a worse team than Crawford is.
Mm-hmm.
I'm with you. I would love to see Josh Harding included on this team. I don't think he makes it, but what a good story that would be.
Yeah. So on my defense core right now is I've got PK Subban, Duncan Keith, Brent Seabrook, Shea Weber, Drew Doughty, Alex Pietrangelo, Jay Bouwmeester, and as the 8th guy, I take our local guy, Mark Giordano.
So you left out Dan Boyle.
I did.
The only guy that's different than my list. I have the exact same list. I have Keith and Seabrook. I have Bouwmeester and Petro. I think these two pairings are essentially locked up. We'll find out for sure in a week.
Mm-hmm.
Some people tend to think that Seabrook doesn't deserve to be on this team, but his numbers are what they are. He's a plus 15 or something like that this year, and he logs a ton of minutes. And the guy that he's going to be playing with, it's an absolute lock for this team.
Mm-hmm.
He's very familiar with, and he's going to allow Duncan Keith to feel a little more comfortable and to do their thing. Jay Bouwmeester would have not been on a lot of people's lists going into this season.
He was a bubble guy for sure.
Mm-hmm.
I believe he was at the summer camp, so I think he was on a lot of radars. His time here in Calgary, I don't know, you watched him play as much as I did, and he's just one of those guys who gets a bit of a bad rap for not caring just because he's just that type of person where nothing really bothers him.
He's so stoic out there. Well, the thing is with Bouwmeester, you know what you're going to get. And he skates very well. And same thing, you've got one of the premier defensemen
Mm-hmm.
in the world playing beside him and having one of his best seasons, obviously, because he has the reliable horse that is Jay Bouwmeester, and that can kind of make up for his mistakes. That can get back there if he pinches.
Yeah.
So I included Dan Boyle. You did not. I think he makes this team. I would love to see Mark Giordano make this team, but I think Boyle makes it based on his reputation and his previous experience with Team Canada and the fact that he's still a very good defenseman in the league. But I do have him on the outside looking in as far as playing time.
Yeah, I went with Giordano. I know it's a bit of a shocker to some people, but I get to see him here in Calgary all the time. You look at, he's got 17 points in 22 games. There's a very good chance he's leading the Flames in scoring if he's not injured. And anytime you have a defenseman who leads a team in scoring, there's something to be said about that. I also like the fact that he played that season in Russia. He knows about the culture. He knows the rink. He's probably played in the building in Sochi. And just being able to be there in almost a leadership role. Because you talked earlier about how good he's been as a captain of the Flames. I mean, he could bring that to Team Canada. And maybe he's the 25th guy, but just having that guy in that room is huge to me.
Yeah, he's got some overseas experience, some world championship experience, playing 25 minutes a night for pretty mediocre to lousy Calgary team. 17 points in 21 games. Eric Francis tweeted recently that had he not been injured, he would probably be on the radar, or at least being discussed outside the Calgary media, and I can't agree more. I think he is one of the premier defensemen currently playing in this province and in this country, and I would like to see him get a sniff. I don't think he does. I think that injury hurt him quite a bit. But if Gio was on this roster, do I think he would have do I think he would look at a place? Not at all.
Yeah. So up front, who do you got?
Back to my list here. So up front, I think we're both very center heavy. And
yes.
Man, this is going to be an issue for Mike Babcock. In terms of trying to figure out where to slot these guys. My centerman, in no specific order, besides Sidney Crosby being the number one, I've got Jonathan Toews. I have Patrice Bergeron, Ryan Getzlaf, and Jonathan Tavares. Again, I'm not really sure where these guys are going to slot. I have several other centers that I would currently have on my wing. Other players I have Steven Stamkos, Mike Richards, Matt Duchene, Marty St. Louis, Logan Couture, Claude Giroux, Corey Perry, and finally Jamie Benn. How about yourself?
Myself, my forward lines are as follows. On the top line, I have Marty St. Louis playing with Sidney Crosby and Steven Stamkos. The second line is Jonathan Toews centering Jamie Benn and Claude Giroux. The third line, which will be kind of my primary shutdown line, no two better guys than Patrice Bergeron and Mike Richards, so I'm taking both of them. And Logan Couture has proven to be a very good all-around player. Fourth line, I think this line's only going to play 10 minutes a game. So, I went with guys that could just bring some energy for that 8 or 10 minutes. I had Joe Thornton, excellent face-off man. He can also play some power play. It seems kind of funny talking about Joe Thornton as a fourth-line player, but anytime you can have that big center that can win face-offs.
And regardless of the case, whoever plays on Team Canada's fourth line is going to be a number one player wherever they play.
And playing with him, I had Andrew Ladd. I love the sandpaper there. I think he gets in, can finish checks. He's having a good season. And Milan Lucic. And then as the 13th, 14th guys, a guy that I haven't heard a lot in the media, but Ryan Johansson is having an excellent season in Columbus. And, he's a guy I'd take because he might not play much this time, but he's going to be huge down the road. So you just take him for that experience. And then Ryan Getzlaf as well.
As far as your fourth line goes, I did not include any of those guys on my roster. If any of those make the team, I will not be overly surprised. He makes some good arguments as far as the grit that they bring. My biggest issue would be the speed factor and the big ice. And I think, as we spoke earlier today, I think it's a little bit overrated. At the end of the day, these guys will adapt. They're the best players in the world. But, foot speed on that line could be a bit of an issue. That's why I went with what I would consider probably a little bit smaller, a little bit faster lineup. And for me, Ryan Getzlaf, he's not only on this team, but he's playing definitely as a top four centerman. He's been one of the best players in the league this year. He's over a point per game, and there's a reason the Anaheim Ducks are where they are in the standings, and I think he's the number one reason for that. And saying that, I probably don't put Corey Perry on my team if I don't include Getzlaf. But again, going back to the familiarity, big bodies, Corey Perry can be a pest.
They definitely got some chemistry. I mean, they've played together, 2007, 2006?
And your lineup has a lot more, I would say, sandpaper, than mine. So a guy like Corey Perry, he's not considered to be a really tough guy, but he's going to irritate you. He's going to get in the crease. And
you look at him and you just want to punch him.
Exactly. And you need some spiteful guys on this team. You got the David Backuses on the Americans.
We should just dress a whole team of instigators. You could bring Marchand, Cook,
maybe
anybody.
Maybe McGrattan makes this team.
Yeah.
But no, I think we agree for the most part. I think a really interesting conversation that will happen down the road, and maybe you'll see an emergence during the Olympics. But I expect Patrice Bergeron to play a bigger and bigger role as the Olympics goes on. Mm-hmm. He's the best face-off man
best
in the
penalty
NHL,
killer
best
in the
penalty
NHL.
killer. And who do you want taking face-offs, late in games in the defensive zone? Whether we have him written down as the number 4 or number 3 centerman on this team, yeah. I think by default, strictly because of his face-off and penalty-killing defensive ability, I think he kind of becomes the default number 2.
Yeah. Plus, he's a clutch scorer. I mean, just ask the Leafs how good this guy is in the third period.
61.7% in the dot. He's a Leaf killer. He's on our team. And Crosby's a good centerman. He's 51.5, which is it's respectable, but that number has been higher in his career, and I could see Patrice Bergeron taking the majority of key face-offs throughout this Olympics.
Yeah. One of the guys we both had that I haven't heard on a lot of teams' lists, Jamie Benn. Why do you include him?
Well, he was the last guy included on my list, and I had a hard time. I really like Jamie Benn. He's trending up. He's a big body. He plays physical. He plays on both sides of the ice. Foot speed could be a bit of an issue. For me, it came down to he or Eric Staal, and I think they're both pretty interchangeable. Eric Staal has got the experience, obviously playing in 2010, but hasn't quite looked like the same player over the last couple of years, especially after that injury. Yeah,
I think being Calgary fans, we are a little slanted here because, what did he put up, 6 points against us?
Yeah,
so,
he's a Flames killer.
That's a statement.
And, he's a tough guy. He went toe-to-toe with Iggy there a couple of years ago, and, again, adds a little bit more grit and size to this roster.
Anytime I've watched him play, you just look at just the package he brings athletically, where he's just so big and strong. And to me, he's a no-brainer for this team. So moving on, one guy we both left off, Rick Nash.
Yeah. And you made this comparison earlier. He has a bit of a Bobby Ryan appeal to him. Mm-hmm. He plays a different position, and he's a bigger body, but he can be a little bit sleepy at times. A little bit. It just looks like he takes the odd shift off.
Yeah,
and has all the talent in the world, but doesn't always use it.
You look at his whole career. He was the man in Columbus. They never did anything. He leaves. They make the playoffs. He goes to New York. They're one of the top teams in the NHL. Now they're fighting for a playoff spot. Like, who is this guy?
Yeah, 3 years ago I thought a lot. I think a lot of people saw Rick Nash as a top 5 player in the entire league. And, and that's just not the case anymore.
Yeah, but probably the most noticeable, the guy that pops up on all the lists I've seen, Chris Kunitz.
Yeah, you and I both left him off, and I'm going to kind of contradict myself a little bit because I have gone a lot with chemistry. I have Patrick Sharp on this team because of Jonathan Toews, and I have those guys playing together. And obviously, you've seen what I've done on the back end with defensemen. I like Chris Kunitz. I got in a big argument years ago with somebody when he was traded to the Penguins, saying that he had the ability to really play a role on this team, and that was when Hossa left, obviously leaving a pretty big hole. And he's done exactly that. He has incredible chemistry with number 87, but I think there's enough other players on this roster that can develop that same chemistry. And your top line I absolutely love, whether or not that will actually come to fruition. But the idea of Sid playing between Stamkos and St. Louis, who already have arguably the best chemistry of any 2 forwards in the NHL, and then you throw out the best
player in the world.
Let's see what they can do.
So it's kind of a no-brainer to me. But the other guy we left off, Jarome Iginla, local guy. We're a little biased here because we've got to see him for so long, but I think he wasn't invited to the summer camp. There's a lot of controversy here in Calgary about it.
Yeah, maybe not so much the fact that a lot of people here expected him to go out and make the roster as a lock, but more just the contributions he's made over the last couple of years to this team, to Team Canada, whether it was in 2002 or 2010. Iginla's a slow starter. Happened again this year, but look what he's done in December. He has 12 points in his last 12 games, and Iggy's heating up. There's no doubt. I think what keeps Iginla off the radar is his skating ability.
Yeah, and just on that note, his skating ability is a little not great.
It's
Over
not
the
where it
years,
was,
it's
anyway.
dropped off. I mean, he's 36 years old. But at the same time, if you're only playing a fourth line 6-8 minutes a game, then, Iggy's definitely a guy I'm comfortable on the ice with for 6 or 8 minutes a game.
Late in the game, you need a big goal. You need a big shot on that power play.
Yeah.
He,
someone goes down with an injury, you got to put someone with Crosby. There's magic there.
and everyone likes him.
Yeah. He's a great guy.
So Jerome will not be on this team, but I think he at least warranted a look heading
Yes.
down the stretch, and same thing as we spoke about with Mark Giordano.
Well, that wraps up our first edition of Nice Skates Want a Puck. You can follow me on Twitter at Ian Esplin, Matt at Maximum Benson, and the show at wanna_puck. You can also email the show anytime at niceskateswannapuck@hotmail.com with any show ideas, questions, or comments. Thanks for listening.
Next week, we hope to improve from today's show, and we will break down Team Canada's Olympic roster, as well as take a look at the past week for the Calgary Flames and whatever else pops up around the NHL. I want to say a big thank you to Shred Kelly for providing us with our music today. You can check them out at shredkelly.com or on iTunes.
Has found me away by the shores and the banks. I'm just